I can still hear her voice in my head like it just happened. My sister Patty leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "You're not even half the soldier guarding the gate." She didn't smile. She didn't laugh. It wasn't a joke. She meant every word. And she said it with that sharp, smug tone she's been perfecting since middle school. We were sitting in my mother's dining room, the one with the heavy oak table that's been there since I was a kid. Mom had insisted on a family dinner, which meant I cooked most of the meal because she doesn't trust Stephen, my younger brother, with anything sharper than a butter knife. Patty, of course, didn't lift a finger. She just showed up late, perfume cloud following her, wearing a brand new blouse I knew damn well she couldn't afford. The table was set, the roast chicken was on the platter, the mashed potatoes still steaming, and we were doing that awkward thing where everyone pretends to enjoy being together when in reality, it's one wrong word away from a knife fight. And then Patty opened her mouth. Her words landed harder than she expected, I think. For a second, the room went dead silent. Stephen froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Mom looked down at her plate, like maybe if she stayed quiet enough, the whole thing would blow over. But I felt my blood pressure spike. I wasn't angry in the usual way you get angry when your sister insults you. It was that sharp, hot anger you feel when someone finally goes too far. So I pushed my chair back. It scraped across the hardwood floor with a screech, and I looked her dead in the eye. "Then he can pay your mortgage." That one sentence changed the entire energy of the room. Patty's smirk cracked like cheap plaster. Stephen blinked, his eyes darting between us, confused like he'd missed the first half of a movie. "Mortgage? What mortgage?" His voice cracked in that pathetic way it always does when he's caught off guard. Mom gripped her napkin so tight it tore in half. She didn't say a word. She never does when Patty and I go head to head. I think she still hopes we'll grow out of it, like it's just sibling rivalry. But this wasn't about childhood jealousy. This was about years of me carrying this family while they all pretended I was the problem. I leaned back, folded my arms, and let the silence sit for a beat too long. It was delicious. Patty started to fidget, tugging at her sleeve, eyes darting around like she was looking for a fire escape. She wasn't ready for me to say that. She was expecting me to shrink back, to play the quiet soldier who swallows everything and doesn't fight back at the dinner table. She forgot that soldiers don't just stand guard. We fight when provoked. "You heard me," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady, the way I've done in briefings and after-action reports. "Your mortgage, the one I've been covering every month while you strut around acting like you're better than me." Stephen's fork clattered onto his plate. "Wait, you've been paying her mortgage?" He looked at Patty like he'd just realized he was living in a con artist's house of cards. Patty snapped back to life, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, don't be dramatic. It's not like—" "Not like what?" I cut her off. "Not like I've been draining my savings to keep you from losing that house you can't afford? Not like I've skipped out on things I needed because I was too busy covering for you?" Mom finally whispered, "Michelle." But her voice was so soft, so unsure, it might as well have been silence. Patty slammed her hand on the table. "You don't get to throw that in my face. You chose to do it. Nobody asked you." That's the thing about Patty. She'll happily take every lifeline you throw her way, then act like she's the victim for needing it. She's been doing it since she was a teenager. I buy her a car when hers broke down. She complains it's not the color she wanted. I cover a credit card bill. She whines that I didn't do it fast enough. And now, I've been covering her damn mortgage for a year, and somehow I'm the bad guy because I finally said it out loud. Stephen, bless his clueless heart, still looked lost. "Wait, how long? How long have you been doing this?" I didn't hesitate. 12 months, 12 payments. 12 times I put my own needs second so Patty could play queen of the cul-de-sac. The sound that came out of Stephen was somewhere between a gasp and a choke. He looked like a fish out of water. Mom pressed her hands together in her lap, eyes closed like she was praying for the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Patty, though, she went into attack mode. She always does when she's cornered. "You think this makes you a hero?" she snapped. "You think throwing money around makes you better than me? You're pathetic, Michelle. You've got no husband, no kids, nothing to show for your life but some uniform. You hide behind the army because you've got nothing else." Her words bounced off me. I've been called worse by better people. But something about hearing it from her, right after I'd admitted the one thing I swore I'd keep to myself, pushed me past the point of caring. I stood up, slow and deliberate. You know what, Patty? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't have a husband or kids. But I've got something you'll never have. Discipline, honor. The respect of people who actually matter. And while you were busy sneering at me, I was paying for the roof over your head. So maybe, just maybe, you should think twice before insulting the one person keeping your ass out of foreclosure. The look on her face was priceless. Shock, fear, rage, all mixed together like bad makeup. Stephen sat there with his mouth open, useless as ever. Mom stared at her plate like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever seen. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the quiet one in the room. I didn't feel like the soldier everyone takes for granted. I felt like the only adult at that table. And as I stood there, watching Patty scramble for a comeback, I realized something important. This wasn't just about one dinner or one insult. This was years of resentment boiling over, years of me being silent while they all treated me like I didn't count. Patty finally found her voice, but it wasn't strong anymore. You had no right, she stammered. That was private. Private? I said, laughing without humor. Patty, when you've been living off someone else's wallet, it stops being private. It becomes family business. And tonight, the whole family just found out. Stephen slumped back in his chair, shaking his head. Mom muttered something about not at the table, but it was too late. The table had already become the battlefield, and I wasn't about to retreat. Patty's face was still flushed, and I could feel the tension in my chest as I stood there, steady on my feet, refusing to back down. My hands were tight at my sides, nails biting into my palms, and then, like it always does when I'm under fire, my mind drifted back to where all this started when we were kids. Patty was the golden one from the very beginning. If she got a B on a test, Mom put it on the fridge like it was a Harvard diploma. If I came home with an A, the response was always, well, that's expected from you. She got to stay out late, got her first car paid off by Dad, and whenever she messed up, it was brushed aside as Patty, just being Patty. Meanwhile, if I forgot to do a chore, it turned into a lecture about responsibility. I can still picture her teenage bedroom, posters of movie stars, piles of clothes on the floor, perfume bottles lined up like trophies. She would spend hours getting ready for a party while I was in my room doing push-ups because I figured if nobody cared whether I looked pretty, at least I could be strong. She teased me constantly, called me Little Sergeant, because I liked order and discipline. The name stuck longer than I'd like to admit. Mom never meant to make it worse, but she did. She would step in every time Patty and I argued, and somehow, Patty always walked away the winner. If I protested, Mom would sigh and tell me, "You know how your sister is. Just let it go. Let it go." That phrase became the soundtrack of my childhood. Every insult, every unfair advantage, every time Patty got away with something, I was told to just let it go. The night I left for the army is burned into my memory. I was 18, packed into the back of Dad's old Chevy, one duffel bag on my lap. Dad looked proud, like he was handing off a torch. Mom sat stiff, clutching her purse, not saying much. And Patty? She leaned against the doorframe of the house with that same smug grin I saw at dinner, calling out, "Good luck, little sergeant. Try not to embarrass yourself." I wanted to snap back, but I swallowed it. I remember telling myself, "Fine, I'll show her." Joining the army wasn't about proving Patty wrong at first, but she sure helped fuel the fire. When you grow up with someone constantly reminding you that you're not enough, you start craving a place where effort actually matters. The army gave me that. Basic training was brutal, but it felt like home compared to being under the same roof as Patty. At least when a drill sergeant yelled at me, I knew it was because I had screwed up, not because someone just enjoyed making me small. And when I pushed myself harder, I was rewarded. I rose through the ranks, earned respect, and for once, I wasn't the shadow. I was someone. Back home, Patty kept playing queen of the family. Every phone call from Mom had some version of, "Your sister's going through a tough time, Michelle. Can you send a little money?" Or, "Patty's marriage isn't working out, Michelle. Can you come home for a while?" And every time I did, I knew Patty was rolling her eyes, telling people, "Michelle thinks she's saving the world. Howdy for." The truth is, I never wanted to be her savior. I wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet. But Patty thrived on being rescued. She played damsel so well that even Stephen started buying into it. He was younger, more naive, and she'd sweet-talk him into doing favors that he couldn't afford. But when the bills came due, guess who they called? Not Patty, not Stephen, me. It wasn't just money, it was everything. Dad passed away when I was on deployment, and Patty turned it into her personal stage. Mom told me later that Patty cried the loudest at the funeral, told everyone she was the one holding the family together. Meanwhile, I was thousands of miles away, sitting in a sandstorm, clutching a photo of Dad in his uniform, knowing I couldn't even come home to bury him. That memory stuck like a splinter. Patty painted herself as the loyal daughter, the one who never left, while I was branded the one who abandoned the family. Nobody cared that I was honoring Dad the only way I knew how, by serving. Nobody cared that I was sending money home while Patty was busy burning through her credit cards. Mom, bless her heart, didn't see it, or maybe she chose not to. She loved us both, but her love wasn't balanced. Patty was her mirror image, same mannerisms, same charm, same quick temper, and Mom related to that. I was different. I was structured, blunt, sometimes cold. So it was easier to pat Patty on the back and tell me to toughen up. That favoritism left scars, even if Mom never meant harm. When Patty trashed me, Mom would say, "She doesn't mean it." When Patty failed, Mom said, "She'll bounce back." But when I stumbled, the tone was different. "You should know better." And maybe that's why I worked harder than anyone else to make sure nobody could ever say I didn't measure up. Looking back, that night in the dining room wasn't just about one insult. It was decades of this pattern boiling over. Patty had always been the star, the one who could do no wrong, while I was expected to carry the weight and keep quiet about it. But the Army had taught me not to keep quiet. It had taught me that respect is earned, not handed out like candy. I never forgot the moment I signed those enlistment papers, the pen shaking in my hand, knowing Patty would laugh about it later. I could almost hear her saying, "Of course Michelle's joining the Army. She loves being bossed around." And yet, all these years later, here I was, a decorated officer, respected, accomplished, and she was still stuck in that same high school mindset, trying to tear me down with a cheap insult. The thing is, insults only work when the person throwing them has the upper hand. Patty lost hers the second I revealed the truth about her mortgage. For once, she wasn't untouchable. She was exposed, stripped bare in front of Stephen and Mom, and I wasn't about to let her crawl back into her old position of power without a fight. The weight of those years pressed down on me as I looked at her, trembling with anger but unable to respond. It was the first time I realized just how much of my life had been defined by her shadow, and how damn good it felt to finally step out of it. The heat from the dining room seemed to fade as my mind pulled me back to another kind of heat, the kind that came off desert sand in Iraq. I remember the way the air shimmered, how your boots felt like they were cooking from the inside, and how every noise made your body tense because it might be more than just the wind. That was the reality I lived in while Patty was back home sipping wine on a porch swing. Deployment strips you down fast. You learn what you're made of because you don't get a choice. I had been 24 when I landed at Balad, and nothing prepared me for the sight of a base that looked like it was built out of dust and determination. The nights were loud with generators and distant artillery, and the days were a mix of boredom and sudden chaos. One second, you're sipping lukewarm coffee, the next you're hitting the dirt because an incoming alarm is screaming at you. Those were the moments that carved me into who I became. I wasn't the overlooked kid anymore. I wasn't Patty's little sister in anyone's shadow. I was Captain Grant. My uniform had my name stitched on it, my soldiers looked to me for orders, and when I spoke, people listened. Respect didn't come from being the favorite, it came from showing up, staying steady under fire, and proving you wouldn't crack. But while I was building a life out there, things were falling apart back home. I got the Red Cross message about Dad's heart attack in the middle of a briefing. My CO pulled me aside, handed me the paper, and for a second, everything around me blurred. Dad was gone. Just like that. The request to attend his funeral was submitted, but it got denied. Mission requirements. There were no extra flights, no leeway in the schedule. It didn't matter that my father was being buried in Kentucky while I stood in desert camo. The Army doesn't pause for grief. I went back to work, numb, because there was no space for anything else. That night I sat on my cot and stared at a picture of Dad in his old Vietnam fatigues. He'd been younger than I was when it was taken, grinning like the world couldn't touch him. I thought about how proud he'd been when I enlisted, How he called me soldier with that little spark in his eye. Missing his funeral cut deeper than any insult Patty could ever throw at me because it felt like I'd failed him. Meanwhile, Patty was at home putting on a performance. Mom told me later how Patty sobbed loud enough for the whole church to hear, draped herself over the casket like she'd been his caretaker, like she was the backbone of the family. People comforted her, told her how strong she was. Not one of them thought about the daughter who was halfway across the world, sitting under a tin roof with sand in her teeth, wishing she could be there. That's what service costs. People clap when you wear the uniform, but they don't see the birthdays you miss, the Christmases spent on a cot, the funerals you're not allowed to attend. They don't see you choosing duty while your family rewrites the narrative of who you are. By the time I came home months later, the story had already been told. Patty was the grieving daughter, and I was the one who left. I didn't correct anyone. You learn to conserve your energy in the army, and sometimes that means picking your battles. But I never forgot. I never forgot standing in that chow hall, surrounded by plastic trays and paper cups, while Patty took my absence and turned it into her spotlight. The truth is, there were more sacrifices than just Dad's funeral. I missed Stephen's college graduation, not that he finished much with it. I missed Mom's surgery when she had her gallbladder taken out. I missed entire stretches of their lives, and every time I came home, I was the outsider. They talked about events, neighbors, scandals, all things I had no part in. It felt like walking into a TV show halfway through the season and trying to catch up. But I had my own stories. I had names of soldiers who'd never make it home, faces I still see when I close my eyes. I carried weight they could never imagine, and they carried none of mine. And when I sat at that dinner table years later, hearing Patty sneer about me not being half the soldier guarding the gate, all of those memories stacked up behind my anger like ammunition. What Patty never understood is that the army gave me more than it took. It took my chance to say goodbye to Dad, but it gave me the discipline to face loss without crumbling. It took my 20s, but it gave me rank, leadership, and the kind of confidence you can't buy. It taught me that my worth didn't come from being someone's favorite child. It came from proving myself in the hardest conditions possible. I carried that with me every time I came home and faced Patty's smirks, Stephen's excuses, and Mom's blind spots. I knew they couldn't touch me the way they used to. They could try, sure, but once you've been shot at, your sister's cheap insults lose a lot of their sting. Still, the wound of Dad's funeral never closed all the way. It sat under the surface, raw, and I think that's why Patty's digs about me not having a family cut deeper than I let on. She never had to choose between family and duty. She never had to wonder if her father died disappointed because she wasn't there to lay him to rest. I did, and I carried that question like a rucksack on my back. At the dinner table, standing over her with the truth about her mortgage hanging in the air, I could feel all of it pressing behind me. The sandstorms, the missed goodbyes, the funerals I couldn't attend, the soldiers I buried in foreign soil. All of it lined up like silent witnesses to the fact that I had given more for this family and this country than Patty ever would. And instead of respect, all I got was another insult. My stomach tightened as I stood there at the table, the memory of all those missed years and sacrifices grinding against the reality in front of me. Patty's face was red, Stephen's mouth still hanging open, and Mom looked like she wanted to vanish into the wallpaper. And underneath all that tension was the weight of something I had carried alone for 12 long months, the damn mortgage. It hadn't started with some grand plan. It was one late-night call from Mom, her voice cracking as she told me Patty might lose the house. The bank had called. Payments were behind. Patty swore it was just a temporary issue, but I could read between the lines. I didn't even hesitate. I opened my laptop, logged into my account, and set up the payment. $1,200 gone with one click. The first month didn't sting too badly. I figured, all right, she's in trouble. I can cover it. No big deal. But then month 2 rolled around, and Patty hadn't found a job, hadn't picked up extra work, hadn't done a damn thing except post pictures on Facebook with overpriced coffee in her hand. Month 3, Mom called again, saying Patty was just overwhelmed. I paid again, biting my tongue. By month 6, it wasn't just money leaving my account, it was resentment building like a clogged pipe ready to burst. Every time I transferred those funds, I thought about the things I wasn't buying for myself. The home repairs I was putting off, the vacation I never took, Hell, even just a new pair of running shoes. It all went into Patty's mortgage, and she didn't even have the decency to say thank you. I never told anyone because deep down I knew exactly how it would play out. If I told Mom, she'd excuse Patty, say she was going through a rough time. If I told Stephen, he'd shrug, claim he couldn't do anything, then run back to Patty with the information. And if I told Patty, well, she'd either deny she needed me or act like I owed it to her. None of those outcomes were worth the headache. So I kept it to myself. I set reminders on my phone, logged in on the 1st of every month, and sent off $1,200 like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was my savings draining faster than I could refill it. It was me sitting in my apartment staring at my bank balance, calculating how long I could keep this up before I had to pull the plug. I'd spent years handling money with discipline. The Army doesn't pay luxury wages, but you learn to live within your means. You stash what you can, you plan for the future, you make sure you're not caught off guard. Patty was the opposite. She lived like every paycheck was a jackpot and every bill was someone else's problem. And somehow, I got roped into being the someone else. The tipping point came one night when I checked my balance and saw numbers that made my stomach flip. After covering Patty's latest payment, I had barely enough left to get through the month comfortably. I sat there at my kitchen table, my uniform jacket still on the back of the chair, and thought, what the hell am I doing? 12 months, 12 payments, nearly 15 grand gone. And for what? So Patty could keep living in a house she couldn't afford, pretending she was still the queen of her little world. I remembered staring at my reflection in the dark window that night, jaw tight, and realizing I was close to crossing a line. I wasn't just enabling her, I was chaining myself to her mistakes. And if I didn't stop, I was going to drown right alongside her. The thing that burned me most was how invisible it all was. Nobody saw the transfers. Nobody knew about the quiet sacrifices. They just saw Patty walking around town, head high, pretending she had her life together. People whispered about how resilient she was after her divorce, how she was holding it together for the family. Meanwhile, I was the invisible ATM in the background, propping her up with every deposit. At work, I'd sit through briefings on logistics, training schedules, deployments, all with this gnawing thought in the back of my mind. Can I really keep paying her bills and mine? My soldiers thought I was laser-focused, but half the time I was running numbers in my head, wondering how long before Patty's black hole of a mortgage swallowed me whole. And yet, I didn't stop. Not until that dinner. Not until her words finally lit the fuse. That insult about not being half the soldier pushed me over the edge because I knew exactly how much I had sacrificed to keep her comfortable. The weight of 12 payments pressed on me as I looked across the table at her smug face, watching it crumble when I exposed the truth. She wasn't ready for me to fight back because she thought my silence meant weakness. What she didn't realize was that silence is what soldiers do best. We carry the heavy loads, we don't complain, and we don't broadcast what we're doing until we have to. And when I said it out loud, when I told them all that I'd been paying her mortgage, the silence that followed was worth every drained dollar. It was like the whole house shifted, like the air itself changed. Suddenly, the queen wasn't wearing clothes anymore. She was just Patty, the sister who couldn't keep her own life together without me footing the bill. Stephen's face was pale. Mom's hands shook in her lap, and Patty's eyes darted back and forth like she could find a way to put the genie back in the bottle. But it was too late. The secret was out, and the weight I'd carried alone for a year was finally sitting on the table for everyone to see. I could feel my pulse in my ears, but it wasn't from nerves. It was from relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I was holding back an avalanche. I had said it, and there was no taking it back. And standing there in that dining room, the memories of every transfer, every late-night calculation, every moment of doubt, they all sharpened into one simple truth. I wasn't going to carry Patty's burden forever. Patty's fork clattered against her plate, the sound sharp enough to cut through the silence. She tried to steady her voice, but it cracked anyway. You had no right to air this at the table. I didn't even blink. You had no right to sit here and insult me while I've been the one keeping your house out of foreclosure. Stephen shifted in his chair, looking from her to me like he was watching a tennis match he never wanted tickets for. Mom pressed her lips together, clearly praying one of us would shut up before the neighbors heard through the walls. But the tension was so thick You could slice it with the butter knife Patty never touched. Patty leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You think paying a few bills makes you better than me? You've always been jealous, Michelle. Always. Just admit it. I laughed. Not a cheerful laugh, more like the kind you give when someone says something so stupid it actually stuns you for a second. Jealous of what exactly? Your unpaid debts? Your failed marriage? Your habit of living beyond your means? Her face twitched. I had hit a nerve, and she knew it. Stephen rubbed his forehead like he was trying to massage the whole conversation away. Can we just eat, please? He muttered. But nobody paid attention. Mom finally piped up. This isn't the time. Her voice was trembling, but she tried to sound firm. I snapped my gaze to her. When exactly is the time, Mom? Because I've been paying her mortgage for a year and not one of you bothered to ask where the money came from. Meanwhile, Patty sits here tearing me down for not being a wife or a mother, like those are the only roles that count. Patty slammed her napkin onto the table. Don't twist this around. You think you're some kind of hero because you wear a uniform? Newsflash. Real women have families. Real women don't hide behind the army because they're too scared to live a normal life. That one stung, but not because it was true. It stung because it came from her, my sister, who had wasted every opportunity while I built something out of my life. I leaned across the table, my voice low but sharp. Real women pay their own bills, Patty. Real women don't let their little sisters bankroll their entire lifestyle while pretending they're better than everyone else. That. Stephen finally snapped, his voice louder than I'd ever heard it. Wait a second. Michelle, are you telling me you've been covering for her all this time while she's been acting like she's got everything under control? What the hell? Patty shot him a glare. Shut up, Stephen. You don't know what you're talking about. But Stephen was on a roll now. No, you shut up, Patty. I'm tired of you always playing the victim. We all bend over backwards for you, and you sit there treating Michelle like dirt. She's been helping this family more than anyone, and you're too damn proud to admit it. Patty's mouth fell open. She wasn't used to Stephen raising his voice. He was usually her sidekick, not her critic. Mom tried again, softer this time. Please, let's not fight. This family has been through enough. I turned to her. Through enough? Or through exactly what Patty drags us through over and over? You've always protected her, Mom. Always. Even now, when it's obvious who's been carrying the weight, you still want to smooth it over instead of holding her accountable. Mom's eyes darted to her lap. She didn't deny it. The air in the room was thick with everything unspoken. The clinking of cutlery was gone, replaced by the thud of my heartbeat and the sound of Patty's shallow breathing. She was cornered, and we all knew it. Patty tried to rally. She straightened in her chair, chin high, voice laced with venom. You just love making me look bad. That's all this is. You couldn't stand me being the one everyone admired, so you've been waiting for this chance to tear me down. I shook my head slowly. Admired? Patty, people pity you. They don't admire you. They shake their heads when they see you walking around pretending you've got it all together. And you know why they pity you? Because you had every chance to build a life, and instead you let me build it for you. Stephen exhaled loudly, leaning back in his chair. God, this is insane. He looked straight at Patty. You've been lying to us, to the whole damn town, and Michelle's the one footing the bill. Unbelievable. Patty snapped at him, her voice breaking. Shut up, Stephen. You don't get it. You never get it. Michelle doesn't understand what it's like. I cut her off before she could twist the knife into another excuse. No, Patty. You don't understand what it's like. You don't know what it's like to spend nights in a desert wondering if you'll make it to morning. You don't know what it's like to miss Dad's funeral because duty came first. You don't know what it's like to sacrifice everything and then come home to this to your sister telling you you're not even half the soldier guarding the gate. Now, the room was silent again, but this time it wasn't the calm before another insult. It was the silence of realization, the silence of truth, hanging so heavy no one could look away from it. Patty's lip trembled, but she tried to mask it with another sneer. You think anyone cares? You think your little sob story makes you better? Newsflash, Michelle. Nobody asked you to pay my mortgage. You chose that. So don't act like some martyr now. I stepped back from the table, my hands braced against the edge. My voice didn't shake. You're right. Nobody asked me. And maybe that's the problem. I've been bailing you out of every mess since we were kids. and you've never once taken responsibility. Well, congratulations, Patty. Everyone knows now. Everyone sees exactly who you are. Stephen's eyes darted to Mom, like he was waiting for her to finally step in. But she just sat there, lips pressed together, hands shaking in her lap. And in that heavy silence, with the roast chicken untouched and the mashed potatoes going cold, I could feel the balance in the room shifting. For once, Patty wasn't the loudest voice. She wasn't untouchable. She was exposed, sitting in her own mess, and there was nothing she could say to take it back. Stephen shoved his chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. He pointed at me like he was demanding an answer in a courtroom. Wait a damn minute, Michelle. What do you mean you've been paying the mortgage? That's Patty's responsibility. Are you telling me you've been covering it behind our backs? Patty's face drained of color. She looked like a kid caught red-handed with stolen candy. Stephen, don't listen to her. She's twisting it to make me look bad. I pulled my phone from my pocket, calm as could be, and tapped a few times. Here, you want the proof? I'll show you every single transaction. 12 payments, one after the other. Straight from my account to the bank. And while I was cutting corners, skipping dinners, and reusing boots until they nearly fell apart, your sister here was buying handbags and spa treatments. I slid the screen toward him. Stephen leaned over, scrolling with wide eyes. His jaw slackened as the dates and amounts piled up in front of him. Holy hell, he muttered. You weren't kidding. Every month, $1,347 plus fees. Oh. Patty lunged forward to grab the phone, but Stephen yanked it back. No, Patty, don't even try. Michelle's been covering your ass while you played Queen of the Block. Patty snapped, her voice sharp. You don't get it, Stephen. She did this on her own. I never begged her. I never forced her. If she wants to play hero, that's on her, not me. I folded my arms. You didn't beg? That's rich. You whined about losing the house, cried about how you couldn't face Mom, and dropped hints about Dad rolling in his grave if you ended up homeless. You didn't have to beg. You knew I couldn't stand by and watch the family name dragged through the mud. You counted on me, Patty. And you were right. I caved. But don't you dare pretend you didn't manipulate the hell out of me. Stephen slammed the phone down on the table, rattling the plates. I can't believe this. I thought you were doing okay. New clothes, new furniture, acting like you were thriving. Meanwhile, Michelle's been footing the bill. Are you serious? Patty's lip curled. Oh, spare me the lecture. You've got your own problems, Stephen. Don't act like you're better. Stephen's face turned red. At least I'm not bleeding my sister dry while talking down to her. Jesus, Patty, you've been walking around like you're hot stuff while Michelle's been eating ramen to cover your mess. Mom finally spoke, her voice quiet but heavy. Michelle, why didn't you tell me? I locked eyes with her, because I already knew what you'd say. You'd tell me not to make waves, not to upset Patty, to keep the peace like always. I figured if I just handled it, maybe she'd straighten out. But look at her. She didn't change. She doubled down. Patty's nails dug into the table as she hissed. You love playing the victim, admit it. You like being the martyr, the noble soldier saving the helpless sister. That's your whole identity. I tilted my head, smirking. If I'm the martyr, Patty, then what does that make you? The parasite? Stephen barked a laugh, bitter and loud. Parasite's too kind. Leech fits better. Patty's chair screeched as she stood up, shaking with fury. You think you're all saints? You think Michelle's the golden child? She's not. She's just hiding behind her uniform, pretending she's better than us. At least I've lived a real life. At least I've been a wife, a mother. I cut her off, voice sharp as a blade. A wife who got dumped and a mother who pawned off her kid on Mom whenever she wanted a night out. Don't you dare use that as a shield. Her face crumpled for a moment, before the mask snapped back into place. You're cruel. You've always been cruel. Stephen leaned forward, his voice low. No, Patty. She's just finally telling the truth you've been running from. And you know what? It's about damn time. End of teen. The weight of it all pressed down on the table. For the first time, Patty wasn't in control. Her usual tricks, tears, accusations, shifting the blame weren't working. The receipts were there, cold and undeniable. Mom shifted uncomfortably, her hands clutching the tablecloth. Patty, is this true? Did Michelle really pay everything? Patty turned to her, desperate now. Mom, don't look at me like that. I never asked for it. I just let her help. Is that such a crime? I scoffed. You didn't just let me help. You built your whole life on it. You strutted around acting superior while I sacrificed. And tonight, you thought you could get away with cutting me down one more time. Well, congratulations, Patty. The secret's out. Stephen shoved the phone toward Mom, who stared at the screen with trembling hands. She scrolled slowly, her face pale. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. All this time I thought you were finally doing better. Alvar. Patty flinched under her gaze. Mom, please. But Mom didn't let her finish. Her voice cracked as she said, Do you have any idea what this has cost Michelle? Do you even care? She missed meals, Patty. She sold things. And you never once thanked her. You just kept taking. The silence that followed was brutal. Even Patty couldn't come up with a comeback fast enough. I pushed my chair back slowly, standing tall. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I thought family meant something. But I'm not your safety net anymore. You wanted to make me look small, Patty. Instead, you just made yourself look pathetic. Stephen exhaled sharply, leaning back with a bitter laugh. Guess the queen just lost her crown. Patty's eyes burned with hatred, but behind it was fear. Real fear. For once, she knew she couldn't spin this. Not with Stephen staring at her like a stranger. Not with Mom's disappointment hanging heavy in the air. And not with me standing there done playing the fool. Stephen's hand was still on the phone, but now his eyes flicked from the screen to me, then to Patty, like something else was clawing at the back of his mind. He muttered under his breath, Unbelievable. Then louder, All this time you've been lying, Patty. And you let Michelle. He cut himself off mid-sentence, lips pressed together like he'd said too much. I caught it. You let me what, Stephen? Go ahead. Finish that thought. He swallowed hard, shifting in his chair. His fingers drummed nervously on the table, a rhythm that didn't match the casual front he was trying to put on. Patty narrowed her eyes, sensing it too. What aren't you saying? She demanded. Stephen's voice cracked. Nothing. Just nothing. I raised an eyebrow. Nothing usually doesn't make a grown man sweat like he's on trial. What's going on, Stephen? He threw his hands up, trying for humor. Oh, come on, Michelle. Don't turn this into an interrogation. You already nailed Patty. Isn't that enough for one night? Patty seized the opening, sneering. See? She's obsessed. Always digging, always acting like she's still on duty, barking orders. It's exhausting. But Stephen's nervous energy wasn't going away. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. I said, drop it. Mom's voice cut in, sharper than usual. Stephen, don't you dare hide something from me, not after everything we've just heard. That broke him. His shoulders slumped, and his words came out in a rush. Fine, you want the truth? I'm in debt. A lot of debt. The words dropped like a grenade. Patty's jaw dropped. You've got to be kidding me. I crossed my arms, staring at him. Define a lot. He winced. 30 grand. Mom gasped. $30,000? Stephen's face twisted like he hated himself for saying it out loud. It's not like I meant for it to spiral. It started with a few credit cards, then a personal loan. Then I tried to fix it with some sports betting. Patty cut him off, shouting, You idiot! You absolute idiot! You've been lecturing me all night while you've been gambling away your money? Stephen snapped back, voice raw. At least I wasn't pretending I was fine while milking Michelle dry. Patty shoved her chair back and stood, pointing at him. You're worse. You blew 30 grand because you're stupid. At least I didn't gamble. When? Their voices ricocheted around the dining room, ugly and loud. Mom sat frozen, eyes wide, like she didn't recognize either of her kids anymore. I slammed my hand against the table. Enough, both of you. The room went still. I fixed my eyes on Stephen. You're telling me you're drowning in debt, and you sat there judging me for bailing Patty out? Did it ever occur to you that maybe, just maybe, you should have said something before it got this bad? Stephen's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. I was ashamed, okay? I didn't want anyone to know. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. I shook my head slowly. Ashamed? You should be. But not just for the debt. For sitting here tonight and letting me carry the weight like I'm the only adult in this family, while you're gambling? And Patty's buying designer bags? I've been giving up everything. And for what? For this circus? Patty barked out a bitter laugh. Wow, the saint finally loses her halo. Newsflash, Michelle, you chose this. Nobody told you to play hero. If Steven's in debt and I've got bills, that's our problem, not yours. Stop acting like the martyr, Steven muttered. She's not wrong. Why? I spun on him. Excuse me? He flinched, then doubled down, his voice rising. She's not wrong. You didn't have to pay Patty's mortgage. You didn't have to jump in. You do this thing where you can't help yourself, and then you hold it over everyone's head, like you're better than us, because you sacrificed. My jaw tightened. You ungrateful little... I stopped myself, then steadied my voice. You think I wanted to sacrifice? You think I wanted to sell Dad's tools? To wear uniforms with holes in them? To say no to basic things so you two wouldn't drown? No. I did it because somebody had to, and clearly it wasn't going to be either of you. Mom whispered, Michelle, please. But I wasn't done. Steven, you're 35 years old. You've had jobs, chances, time to build something. Instead, you're gambling away money you don't have. And Patty, I turned to her, you've been living off me like a tick, pretending you're better. Both of you disgust me. Patty slammed her hands on the table. You're not perfect either, Michelle. You hide in the army because you don't know how to have a real family. You'd rather take orders than build a life. Don't act like you're better than us. I laughed, bitter and short. You're right. I don't have the perfect family life. But at least I'm not a fraud. At least I can look in the mirror and know I've earned every single thing I have. Can either of you say the same? Steven stared at his lap, silent. Patty looked away, her jaw clenched. Mom pressed her palms together, whispering like a prayer. This family is falling apart. The silence that followed was suffocating. I grabbed my phone from the table, slid it back into my pocket, and stood tall. Maybe it's about time it did. Because I'm done carrying dead weight. Patty muttered, You'll regret this. I looked at her, calm but cold. The only thing I regret is not cutting you both loose sooner. Steven didn't even defend himself. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, like the weight of his own lies had finally crushed him. The food sat untouched, the air heavy with shame and resentment. For once, it wasn't me who felt small. It was them stripped bare, cornered, exposed. And no amount of excuses could hide the truth anymore. Mom's trembling hands finally left her lap and pressed flat on the table, the knuckles white. Her lips quivered like she was fighting herself. Enough. I can't sit here and listen to this anymore without telling the truth. Steven and Patty both froze, caught off guard by the sharpness in her tone. I leaned against the back of my chair, arms crossed, waiting. Mom looked at me, and for a second, I saw something like shame in her eyes. Michelle, you're right. I've always protected Patty. More than I protected you. More than I protected Steven. I thought I was doing what was best. But I see now it wasn't. It was favoritism. Plain and simple. Patty's head whipped toward her. What? Mom, no. You don't mean that. But Mom's voice grew steadier, like she had finally stopped hiding. Yes, Patty, I do. You were always the fragile one, the one I thought couldn't handle the hard things. So I made excuses for you. I defended you when you failed. I covered for you when you lied. And I told Michelle to keep quiet, to stay strong, because I believed she could handle it. I clenched my jaw, because as much as it stung, it explained everything. So all those times you brushed me off when I tried to stand up for myself, all those times you told me to let it go, that was you protecting her, wasn't it? Mom's eyes brimmed with tears. Yes, I convinced myself that Patty just needed more help, that you, because you were stronger, because you went into the army, because you never asked for anything, could carry it without breaking. I didn't see what it cost you. Patty shoved her chair back, furious. This is ridiculous. So now you're turning on me too? You always said Michelle was the stubborn one, the one who made everything harder, and now suddenly she's the saint and I'm the villain? Mom shook her head. No, Patty, you did that yourself. Michelle sacrificed for this family while you mocked her. Steven made mistakes, but at least he admitted them tonight. You've been hiding behind my protection and I let you. That's on me. I failed all three of you in different ways. Steven looked like he'd swallowed a stone. You failed me too? Mom sighed. Yes. I coddled Patty and leaned on Michelle, which left you in the middle, trying to disappear. I didn't give you what you needed either. I thought if I kept the peace, everything would hold together, but all I did was create resentment. The words landed like blows around the table. For once, no one interrupted. Patty's voice cracked, high-pitched, and frantic. So what? You've just been lying to me my whole life, making me believe I was special when really you were just pitying me? Mom's face crumpled. I loved you, Patty. I still do. But yes, I let pity guide me more than honesty. And it hurt Michelle most of all. And I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Do you know what it was like, Mom? To come home from deployments, from losing soldiers I considered family, only to sit at this table and hear that I'd never measure up? Do you have any idea how much harder you made it when you sided with Patty every single time? Mom's tears spilled over now. I thought I was protecting her. I thought you didn't need it. I was wrong. Stephen ran a hand down his face. Wow, this family's a damn mess. Owie, Patty wasn't letting it go. Her voice rose, shrill and angry. Don't you dare pin this all on me, Michelle. Mom spoiled me, fine. But you? You lapped it up every time she called you the strong one. You liked being the hero. Don't pretend you didn't. I shot her a glare. Liked it? Patty, I lived half my life breaking my back because no one else would step up. I didn't like it. I just didn't see another choice. Mom's voice broke through again, low but fierce. And that's the part that shames me most. I made you believe you had no choice. You did everything, and I let you. I let you carry this family's burden while I smoothed over Patty's disasters and ignored Stephen's struggles. I wanted peace, but I created imbalance. And I'm sorry, Michelle. I am so sorry. The apology hit harder than I expected. For a second, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to accept it. Part of me wanted to scream that it was too late. Patty threw her hands in the air. Oh, this is just perfect. Michelle gets her big moment, Stephen admits he's a screw-up, and I'm the scapegoat. Typical. Everyone gangs up on me while I'm the only one brave enough to live how I want. Stephen shot her a look of disgust. Brave? You call sponging off Michelle brave? You call living a lie brave? You've been cosplaying as a successful suburban mom while she paid your bills. That's not bravery. That's leeching. Patty's face went red, her voice sharp. Screw you, Stephen. At least I didn't throw away 30 grand gambling. He fired back instantly. At least I didn't sit here pretending I was better than the person keeping a roof over my head. Mom's voice cut through again, louder this time. Stop it. Both of you. Do you not see? This is exactly what I created, siblings tearing each other apart while Michelle carries everything. No more. I won't protect either of you anymore. You'll deal with your messes yourselves. That stunned silence settled again, heavy and raw. I stared at Mom, searching her face. Do you mean that? Her chin wobbled, but she nodded firmly. Yes, I mean it. I should have said it years ago. I won't ask you to keep bailing them out anymore. If Patty loses her house, she loses it. If Stephen has to work 3 jobs, so be it. It's not on you anymore. It's not fair. You deserve to live your life without carrying theirs. End of tale. Patty's lip trembled, and for the first time all night, she didn't have a comeback ready. Stephen let out a long, shaky breath, like he wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or doomed. And me? For the first time in years, I felt something shift, like maybe the chains I'd been dragging behind me had finally cracked, even if only a little. By the next week, the whispers had already started. Small towns move faster than the internet when it comes to gossip. One person sees a car parked in a driveway too long, another hears a raised voice through the walls, and suddenly the whole block is buzzing. Our dinner disaster had spilled into the neighborhood like gasoline, and all it needed was a spark. That spark came from Patty herself. Instead of keeping quiet, she doubled down. At the grocery store, she strutted through the aisles like nothing was wrong, bragging about her investment property and how she was managing everything beautifully. The problem was, half the people in line had already heard the real story from someone else, and the smirks on their faces told me they weren't buying it. I didn't have to say a word. The truth had legs of its own. 2 days later, I stopped by the local coffee shop to grab a black drip before heading to drill weekend. The barista, a kid who couldn't have been more than 19, leaned in with a grin. Hey, Aren't you Patty Whitmore's sister? People are saying you're the one who saved her house. Is that true? I stared at him, debating whether to shut it down, but the kid already looked like Christmas had come early. Guess you can't believe everything you hear, I muttered, grabbing my cup. But the grin on his face told me the rumor mill didn't need my confirmation. By the end of the week, Patty couldn't walk into church without side eyes. Mrs. Callahan from 2 pews up leaned over to her friend and whispered loudly enough for half the congregation to hear. Imagine living high and mighty while your sister's the one keeping the lights on. Patty's cheeks flamed as she sank lower in her seat. The real blow, though, came at the farmer's market on Saturday. I was picking up tomatoes when I spotted her in her oversized sunglasses, clutching a designer purse like a shield. A group of women near the bakery stall zeroed in on her. One of them, an old classmate of ours named Brenda, raised her voice just enough. Patty, honey, I heard Michelle's been more of a homeowner than you these days. Maybe you should let her pick out the produce too. The women burst out laughing, and Patty froze, her face stiff. She muttered something under her breath and practically ran toward the parking lot. Stephen, who had tagged along with me, whistled low. Well, guess the crown's slipping. I didn't even crack a smile. Part of me wanted to enjoy it, but another part just felt tired. I hadn't asked for this circus. But the circus didn't stop. At the gym, a couple of guys cornered Stephen, asking if it was true his sister had bailed him out too. He stammered, denying it, but his reputation took the hit anyway. Meanwhile, Patty's so-called friends stopped inviting her to their wine nights, suddenly too busy whenever she called. Nothing cuts faster in this town than social exile. Patty tried damage control. She posted pictures online of fancy dinners, tagged herself at salons, and wrote captions about independent women thriving. But the comment section wasn't kind. On Michelle's dime, one person wrote. Another, shouldn't you thank your sister instead of bragging? It didn't take long before she turned her fury on me. I ran into her at the gas station one afternoon. She stormed up to me, sunglasses perched high on her head, jaw clenched. You think this is funny? You think I don't know you've been letting people talk? You could have shut it down. You could have protected me. I leaned against my car, arms crossed. Why would I protect you when you've never protected me? She jabbed a finger toward my chest. Because we're family. Families cover for each other. I tilted my head. Funny, I don't remember you covering for me when you told the whole town I was cold, heartless, and destined to die alone. But sure, now I'm supposed to play bodyguard for your reputation? Get real, Patty. Her face twisted. You love this, don't you? Watching me fall, you've been waiting for this moment. I shrugged. No, I would have been perfectly fine if you had just owned your mess years ago, but you didn't, so now it's owning you. She spat a curse under her breath and stomped back to her car, tires screeching as she pulled away. The fallout didn't stop there. At Sunday dinner, Mom tried to smooth things over, but even she couldn't deny the shift. Neighbors who used to gush over Patty's outfits now asked pointed questions about her mortgage. Old friends avoided her, not wanting to be dragged into her drama, and Patty, for once in her life, was powerless to stop it. Stephen, of all people, summed it up best. He leaned back in his chair, watching Patty sulk into her mashed potatoes, and muttered, "Guess karma doesn't just knock. It kicks the damn door in." I shot him a look, but inside, I couldn't deny the truth. For years, Patty had walked all over me, armed with Mom's protection and the town's admiration. Now, both had vanished. She wasn't the golden child anymore. She was just another cautionary tale whispered about at checkout lines and hair salons. And me? I didn't have to say a word. The truth was doing all the talking. I drove home that night with the window down, letting the cold air slap my face awake. Patty's meltdown at the market kept replaying in my head, but underneath the noise, something quieter was building, a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I realized I didn't need to fight her, or Stephen, or even Mom. The real fight was with myself, and whether I was willing to keep playing savior. When I walked through my front door, the silence hit me. No dishes piled up from anyone else, no TV blaring some show I didn't care about, no one calling my name to solve their problems. Just quiet. For once, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. I dropped my keys on the counter, sat down at the kitchen table, and pulled out an old box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were letters from deployment, photos of my squad, and a folded flag that had come home with me after a buddy didn't make it back. My hands lingered on the fabric. That flag reminded me why I had joined, why I had kept going even when everything else in life felt like a mess. And then it hit me. I had carried that same discipline and sacrifice back home, but I'd been spending it on the wrong battlefield. Instead of fighting for my family's respect, I'd been fighting to keep them from drowning in their own failures. I poured myself a drink, sat back, and muttered out loud, "No more." The next morning, I laced up my boots and went for a run. Every step pounded out the anger, the guilt, the years of carrying other people's weight. By the time I circled back, sweat soaking my shirt, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't paying another cent for Patty's mortgage. I wasn't covering Steven's screw-ups. I wasn't letting Mom guilt me into silence. That evening, I sat down with my checkbook and made it official. I wrote my last payment to the bank, sealed the envelope, and slapped it on the counter. A full year of sacrifice, and this was the end of it. 2 days later, Patty showed up at my door. No warning, no phone call, just her pounding on the wood like the cops. I opened it and leaned against the frame. "What do you want?" Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair pulled into a messy bun, not her usual polished self. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "About what? Your reputation? Your house? Because both of those are your problem now." "All Dax." She shoved past me into the living room, her voice breaking. "You can't just cut me off like this. The bank's already calling. If you stop paying, I'll lose everything." I folded my arms. "That's between you and the bank, Patty. I told you I'm done." Her face twisted, desperation bleeding into rage. "You're really gonna stand there and watch your own sister get thrown out on the street? After everything?" "After everything," I repeated. "After the insults, the lies, the years of you looking down on me while I was the one holding up your life?" "Yes, Patty. I'm done. You want to live like you're better than me? Then prove it. Handle your own mess." She sank onto the couch, head in her hands. "You don't get it. I can't do this alone. I never could." I felt a pang, old habits, that instinct to step in, but I forced myself to stay still. "Then you better learn. Because I'm not your safety net anymore." "Alman." For a long minute, the only sound was her sniffling. Then she looked up, eyes burning. "You've changed." I shook my head. "No, I've just stopped pretending that sacrificing myself is love. Real love doesn't mean bailing people out forever. It means letting them grow up, something you should have done years ago." She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore, then stormed out without another word. When the door slammed shut, I felt something inside me settle. The guilt was still there, but it was smaller, weaker. The peace I felt was stronger. Later that night, I called my old squad mate, Marcus. We hadn't talked in a while, but he picked up on the first ring. "Well, look who finally remembers I exist." I laughed, and for once it didn't feel forced. "Yeah, I know. Been a rough year." We talked for an hour about deployments, about life after the army, about how hard it is to draw lines with people who always expect you to say yes. Marcus said something that stuck with me. "Boundaries aren't walls, Michelle. They're fences. You can open the gate when you want, but you don't have to let everyone trample your yard." It was exactly what I needed to hear. The next day, I called the bank myself and told them flat out, no more payments would be coming from my account. The woman on the phone sounded surprised, but I didn't explain. It wasn't my story to tell. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not because my family had changed, they hadn't, but because I finally had. When I hung up, I stood in the middle of my living room, looked around at the quiet, and realized something important. I wasn't just drawing the line for them, I was drawing it for me. And once that line was there, I knew I wasn't crossing it again. Mom called a family meeting the following Sunday, insisting that we all sit down at her house. Her voice on the phone had that brittle edge, like she was holding herself together with tape. I didn't want to go, but part of me needed to see it through. If there was going to be a final explosion, better to face it head on. When I walked in, Steven was already there, looking like he hadn't slept. Patty sat on the couch, arms crossed, wearing an outfit that screamed, "I still have control," even though the bags under her eyes said otherwise. Mom stood by the window, wringing her hands like she was the referee for a fight she didn't want to see. I didn't bother with pleasantries. So what's this about? Mom gestured toward Patty. She wants to talk to you. Patty shot Mom a glare, then turned to me. Her voice cracked with fake composure. Michelle, listen. I know I've said things I shouldn't have. I know I've been difficult, but you can't just cut me off. I need your help. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You don't need my help. You need accountability. Her face reddened. Stop with the lectures. You don't understand what it's like to be me. Everything's harder for me. People expect me to fail. I raised an eyebrow. They expect you to fail because you've made failure your brand. You've had every opportunity, Patty. You chose shortcuts. And now you want me to pay the bill? No. Stephen finally piped up, his voice rough. She's right, Patty. I've made mistakes, but even I can admit it. You just keep blaming everyone else. Patty turned on him instantly. Oh, don't start. You're drowning in debt, remember? At least I'm not gambling. Stephen shot back. At least I'm not pretending I'm fine while leeching off Michelle's bank account. Their voices climbed over each other until Mom shouted, louder than I'd ever heard her. Stop it, both of you. This isn't about who's worse. This is about the fact that Michelle has carried this family for years, and none of you gave her the respect she deserves. The room fell silent, her words hanging heavy. Patty broke it first, tears spilling down her cheeks. So that's it? You're all just going to throw me to the wolves? After everything I've been through? I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. Patty, you've been through nothing compared to what I've seen. You weren't in the desert. You didn't miss Dad's funeral because of duty. You didn't spend nights wondering if you'd come home at all. And you sure as hell didn't spend your life giving up everything to keep this family afloat. Don't you dare stand there and act like you're the victim. Her sobs turned into a wail. I can't do this on my own. Stephen's voice cracked. Neither could I, Patty. But we have to. Michelle's not our crutch anymore. And I locked eyes with Mom, waiting for her to swoop in and rescue Patty like always. But instead, she nodded slowly. Stephen's right. Michelle's done enough. If you lose the house, Patty, then you lose it. It's time you face the consequences. Patty's face twisted, horror mixed with rage. You can't mean that, Mom. You've always said family sticks together. Mom's voice was steady. Family sticks together, yes. But family doesn't use each other until there's nothing left. Michelle isn't abandoning you. She's saving herself. And I won't stop her this time. Patty's mouth opened and closed like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked at me with raw desperation. Please, Michelle. Just one more month. Just until I figure something out. I shook my head. No. I gave you 12 more months. This ends now. Her voice rose to a scream. You're killing this family. I leaned forward, voice low and sharp. No, Patty. I'm saving myself from the family that's been killing me slowly for years. Stephen slumped back in his chair, muttering, She's not wrong. Patty turned on him with venom. Shut up. You're the real failure here. He exploded, standing so fast his chair toppled over. At least I'm trying to change. At least I've admitted what I've done. You're too damn proud to face the truth. They shouted over each other, the house shaking with the noise. Mom covered her face, whispering prayers under her breath. Finally, I slammed my hand against the coffee table. The crack echoed through the room. Enough. They froze. I looked at Patty, my voice steady. You've had your fun tearing me down, but it's over. I'm not your wallet, I'm not your punching bag, and I'm not your savior. You want to see who you really are? Look around. The people you thought would always cover for you won't anymore. You're on your own. Patty's sobs turned into ragged breaths, her shoulders shaking. Stephen stood with his arms crossed, jaw clenched. Mom sat in silence, eyes closed, tears streaking her cheeks. The room felt stripped bare, every lie and excuse burned away. For once, I didn't feel like the soldier on leave, trying to hold everything together. I felt like myself strong, clear, and done carrying what was never mine to carry. The drive back to my apartment after that final showdown felt different. For once, my chest wasn't tight, my jaw wasn't clenched, and I wasn't rehearsing what I should have said. I had said it all. Every truth I'd swallowed for years was out in the open, and the weight of it was gone. The house I left behind that night was still the same on the outside, but inside, the family dynamics had cracked wide open. And honestly, I wasn't interested in patching them back together. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at the table, and pulled out my laptop. A message from my commanding officer sat at the top of my inbox, subject line, "Congratulations on your promotion." I clicked it open, and there it was, confirmation that I'd been selected for a posting at the Pentagon. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting it sink in. While my sister was losing her grip on her house and my brother was untangling himself from debt, I was moving forward. I hadn't let their chaos sink me, and now the proof was right there in black and white. The following week, I stood in a conference room in D.C., delivering a briefing to a room full of sharp minds. These weren't family dinners filled with petty insults. These were professionals who cared about results, not gossip. When I finished, one of the senior officers clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Grant, you're exactly what we need here." That night, back in my small Pentagon-assigned apartment, I looked at the flag folded neatly on my dresser and thought about Dad. He would have been proud. Not because I'd carried my siblings when they wouldn't carry themselves, but because I finally set the boundary he'd always hoped I would. Word from home trickled in whether I wanted it or not. Mom called occasionally, her voice softer now, careful not to push. She told me Patty's house had finally gone into foreclosure. She was renting a small apartment in town, her reputation in tatters. Old friends kept their distance, tired of her drama. Stephen picked up extra shifts, started paying down his debts piece by piece. It wasn't glamorous, but at least it was honest work. He called me once, voice low, to say, "I'm trying, Michelle. I'm really trying." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest he'd ever come. And Patty? She never called. Not once. I wasn't surprised. Without me propping her up, she had nothing left to stand on but pride, and pride doesn't pay the bills. Meanwhile, I found myself on a different kind of battlefield, helping young soldiers transition back into civilian life. The Army asked me to lead a mentorship program for women returning from deployment. Sitting in that circle, hearing them talk about families that didn't understand, about sacrifices nobody back home seemed to notice, I realized just how universal my story was. One young private, barely 22, broke down as she explained how her parents dismissed her service because her brother had stayed home and built a real life. I put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Listen, your worth isn't measured by who claps for you at the dinner table. It's measured by the discipline and courage you carry when nobody's looking. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As the words left my mouth, I realized I wasn't just talking to her. I was talking to myself, too. Months later, I stood at a veteran symposium, giving a talk about resilience and family dynamics. The auditorium was full uniforms, civilians, students, even some reporters. I told them the truth, not the sugar-coated version. How families can cut deeper than enemies, how silence can weigh heavier than combat gear, and how setting boundaries can be the bravest act of all. When I finished, the applause echoed loud and long. I scanned the crowd and thought about how far I'd come from that dining room full of accusations and secrets. My family didn't collapse because I stopped paying their bills. It collapsed because it had been built on lies, favoritism, and denial. My job had always been to carry heavy things, but somewhere along the way, I learned the heaviest thing of all was letting go. That night, as I walked back to my apartment under the city lights, I felt lighter than I had in years. My sister's words, "You're not even half the soldier guarding the gate," still echoed in my memory. But now they made me laugh. Because the truth was, I'd been more than half the soldier. I'd been the whole damn gate, holding back chaos until I finally chose to step aside and let it crash. And in stepping aside, I didn't lose myself. I found myself. Looking back now, I don't feel anger anymore. Not at Patty for leeching off me, not at Stephen for hiding his mess, and not even at Mom for playing favorites. What I feel is clarity. Families aren't fairy tales, and sometimes the people you expect to lift you up are the very ones who weigh you down. I spent years believing that keeping the peace meant carrying everyone else's burdens. Turns out, peace only comes when you set the burden down. Walking away from that role wasn't betrayal, it was survival. And survival is something I know a thing or two about. The Army taught me discipline, resilience, and how to stand firm under fire. Funny enough, it wasn't the battlefield where I needed those lessons most. It was at my own family's dining room table. Patty lost her house. Stephen finally faced his debts. Mom admitted the favoritism she'd never once said out loud. And me? I stopped bleeding myself dry for people who never noticed the sacrifice. For the first time in years, I wasn't the invisible soldier in my own family. I was just Michelle. Strong, independent, and finally free. That's the real revenge, not screaming louder than them, not rubbing their failures in their faces. The real revenge is thriving when they swore you'd fall. It's walking into a room where people respect you for what you've built, not pity you for what you've endured. And if you've ever been underestimated, written off, or told you weren't even half the soldier, then you already know success is the sweetest payback there is. In the end, I didn't just survive my family drama, I rose above it, and nothing, not gossip, not debts, not favoritism, can take that victory away from me.